A wealthy black man named Michael helped a blind old man in a grocery store. Michael had no idea who the old man was, and what happened afterward left him in great shock. The grocery store was bustling and disorienting, especially for first-time visitors, but not for someone like Michael. As the state general manager of one of the biggest law firms in the country, he was accustomed to frequent trips for numerous business meetings and conferences. On that particular day, Michael was on his way to a business luncheon, but he decided to make a quick stop at the grocery store to pick up some essentials. The 36-year-old rich attorney was pushing his cart down the aisles, mentally checking off items from his list, when he glanced up and saw an old, shabbily dressed man entering the store. The old man was clearly blind as he wore dark shades and carried a walking cane in his right hand. He was struggling to make his way through the maze of people. On the old man's left shoulder was slung a small traveling bag that was even more shabby-looking than his clothing. Michael glanced around him. Everyone else in the store was too engrossed in their phones, magazines, or personal chats to even notice the blind man, let alone help him. A wave of empathy for the old blind man surged through Michael at once. Yes, he was rich, but he had a humble background, and his poor parents had inculcated the spirit of kindness and humility in him. So without thinking twice, Michael got up from his cart, strolled over to the blind man, and offered to help him with his shopping. The blind man smiled at Michael and accepted his offer with a thank you. Michael gently held the old man's frail right hand and carefully led him through the aisles. As they walked, they began to talk. The old man, named John, told Michael that he was on his way to his nephew and godson Pete's wedding in a faraway city. Pete had paid for John's trip to save the blind old man from the hassles of traveling alone by train or bus. According to John, he would spend only 3 days with Pete before returning home. As the two men talked further, Michael felt an instant connection to John with each passing second. Soon enough, Michael's time to leave for his luncheon was approaching, so he had to promptly finish his shopping and leave, but not before exchanging contact information with John and promising to visit him once he came back to the city. Michael indeed visited John on his return, just like he had promised. You won't believe what he discovered about the old blind man's true identity. Michael was born into a poor black family. His father, Samuel, was a manual laborer, while his mom, Linda, was a low-paid cleaner. Michael had 3 younger siblings. Though the couple was poor, they worked really hard to provide their 4 kids with the necessities of life. Michael and his siblings cherished their parents and appreciated their sacrifices. The family was a textbook example of a poor but happy and contented one. Michael wasn't an exceptionally brilliant student, but excelled in school right from his childhood days. He majored in arts while in high school and was able to top his classes. One night after dinner, during his senior year in high school, Samuel and Linda called Michael aside and bluntly told him that they couldn't afford to see him through college. This moment of truth dealt a heavy blow to the young aspiring Michael, who dreamt of graduating from college and becoming a lawyer someday. Luckily for Michael, though, the school administration soon announced that a wealthy and popular lawyer named Barrister Paul, who was an alumnus of the high school he attended, had met with the school board and pledged to start offering a full scholarship program to the best graduating arts student every academic year, starting with that particular session. Michael was elated at the news. He saw the scholarship program as his only hope of achieving his lifelong dream. So he studied extremely hard to win the scholarship. The final exams came and went, and Michael was happy with himself, confident he had done his very best. However, he was worried that Helen, another brilliant student, might win the scholarship. Finally, it was the graduation day ceremony, and the hall was filled to the brim with dignitaries, parents, staff, and students alike. The principal, Mr. Adams, mounted the stage for the awaited announcement at the tail end of the ceremony. When it came to the arts category, Michael's heart started beating so fast and loud. This was it or nothing, Michael anxiously thought. It was either he won the scholarship and proceeded to achieve his lifelong dream of becoming an attorney, or he went back home with nothing, a scenario that would certainly mean he would start searching for menial jobs to make a living. Michael was still deep in thought when the principal called out the best graduating art student. Michael was stunned. He was still trying to recover from his shock when he heard his name ring out from the loudspeakers. Michael Green? There was an eruption of thunderous applause and cheers from the crowd as Michael slowly and nervously walked to the stage to shake the principal's hand and receive a certification. Some of the guests even stood on their feet to catch a better glimpse of the young star in the making. The young, handsome barrister Paul, who was undoubtedly in his early 30s, was standing by Mr. Adams' side to congratulate the boy who had just won the scholarship program. Paul was dressed in an immaculate white, expensive tailor-made three-piece suit and smiling from ear to ear as he shook Michael's hand, whispering, "Congratulations, my boy," into his ears. "Thank you, sir," was all that the dazed-looking Michael managed to reply to both the principal and the barrister. That was how Michael proceeded to one of the most prestigious colleges in the country to study law. He was just 19 then. His benefactor, Paul, provided him with everything he needed to be comfortable. They rarely met in person, as Paul's job kept him very busy, but they frequently spoke on the phone. Paul never refused anything Michael asked for. He even had a tendency of sending Michael more money than he asked for. With time, Michael grew to cherish Paul, whom he came to see as a role model and a second father. While in college, Michael shunned every other extracurricular activity to dedicate himself to his studies. Time flew by, and 4 years later, Michael graduated from college as a top student in his law program, much to the delight of his family and Paul, who attended his graduation. Michael proceeded to law school, where he honed his skills as a lawyer and distinguished himself as an outstanding and brilliant student. 3 years later, Michael finally qualified as a certified lawyer. The boy born without a silver spoon had finally achieved his lifelong dream of becoming a lawyer through sheer hard work, grit, and determination. Of course, he couldn't have done it without the support of Paul. Upon graduating from law school at 26, Michael had initially planned to work for his patron's law firm. Paul had made the offer while Michael was still in college, and he had accepted it without hesitation. However, barely a week after finishing law school, Michael received a lucrative job offer from one of the biggest law firms in the country. The firm offered triple the salary package Paul had proposed, along with an expensive SUV, an official apartment, and a host of other perks. Although Michael would have loved to work for his mentor, this offer was far too enticing to pass up, so he accepted it. Fortunately, Paul had no issues whatsoever with his decision. 2 years after Michael began working with the second firm, he lost all contact with Paul as all his phone numbers stopped working. Michael exhausted every possible means to locate him, but all his efforts were in vain. Just when he was beginning to worry that something bad had happened to his benefactor, Michael heard from a colleague that Paul was hale and healthy. The colleague had run into him at the airport in another country. Michael believed that Paul would someday reach out to explain his sudden disappearance. Until then, he still held the man in high regard. However, years passed, and Michael never heard from his mentor. Still, not a day went by without Michael thinking of him and wishing him well in his endeavors. In his workplace, Michael excelled. Thanks to his successful career, he completely changed his family's once hopeless situation. They now all lived in a well-furnished apartment. Michael also took responsibility for his siblings' education. With his intelligence and outstanding performance, Michael quickly rose through the ranks. Within 4 years, he was promoted to the city's branch manager, and 6 years later, he became the firm's state general manager. Michael was just 36 years old then, and his already humongous salary almost tripled. It was in that capacity as his firm's state general manager that Michael met the old blind John at the grocery store. Once he was back from the conference, Michael made good on his promise and visited John on a late Sunday afternoon. John was so happy to see Michael once he opened the door. After warmly greeting him with a hug, John took Michael's right hand and led him into his dining area with the help of his walking stick. Michael noticed immediately when he stepped into John's home that the old man's living conditions were rather basic, but his apartment was also quite clean. John served Michael a meal he had specifically prepared by himself for the big occasion, as he called Michael's visit. After the delicious meal, washed down with tall glasses of homemade smoothie, both men got talking. It was during the conversation that Michael discovered something truly astonishing about John's true identity. Michael began the conversation by asking John why he chose to live alone despite being blind. John explained that his nephew and godson, Pete, had offered to have him move in, but he didn't want to be a burden to anyone, So he declined the offer and learned to survive on his own. Pete sent him a monthly allowance, which, although not large, was decent enough to cover his basic needs. Michael then asked John if he had ever married. The old man remained silent for a long while, as if he were trying to remember something. According to his story, John wasn't born blind. He told Michael that he was doing quite well for himself and was married with a son until he was struck by glaucoma and lost his sight. John further disclosed that he had tried his very best to restore his vision, but all his efforts had been in vain. Michael offered some words of consolation for his blindness. Then he asked the old man about his career and what happened to his wife and son. John remained silent for a while before he suddenly blurted out, "I was a rich lawyer just like yourself. My son, Charles, followed in my footsteps and became a rich and famous lawyer too. But he and my wife, Karen, made away with all my remaining fortunes once I went blind." "Your son, Charles, is a rich and famous lawyer?" Michael asked, shock written all over his face. "Yes," the old man replied. Michael then went ahead to describe everything about his old patron for John. Then he asked the blind man, "Is that the son you're talking about?" "Yes," John simply replied. Michael collapsed back into his seat in utter shock. Charles, his benefactor who sponsored him through college and law school and indirectly made him a wealthy and influential lawyer, was John's son. Most shockingly, Charles had made off with his blind father's fortunes in connivance with his mother. Michael then recalled losing all contact with Charles several years ago. He also remembered hearing through the grapevine that Charles had ceased the scholarship program and moved to another state. "Your son, Charles, was actually my patron who sponsored my full scholarship from college to law school." Michael almost screamed in shock and confusion at John. "I see," was all the old blind man replied. John's short reply both surprised and confused Michael, so he continued in a tone that he had already employed in the courtroom to win countless cases. "I'm not doubting your story, sir, but it's quite hard to believe that your son, who was rich enough to sponsor such a costly scholarship program, would make away with his old blind father's fortunes." John let out a short laugh before he answered Michael with a smile spread across his wrinkled but handsome face. "I can see that you're a very good lawyer, but I forgot to tell you something," John said softly. "I was the one that actually sponsored the scholarship program in my son Charles's name." As John said those words, Michael felt like he was about to collapse. He was simply stunned beyond words. John then further explained to Michael that he was an alumnus of the high school he attended, just like Charles was. He had always dreamed of sponsoring a scholarship program at his alma mater, but because of his unassuming and quiet nature, he had chosen to do that in Charles's name. Michael was flabbergasted. So this old blind man was the one who made him who he was and not even Charles, as he had always thought. It was quick and spontaneous, but without thinking twice. Just like he had done the very first time he saw John at the grocery store, Michael got up and reached out to John. Then he knelt before him, kissed his forehead, and started thanking him profusely for all he did for him. A visibly moved John told Michael to get up off his knees and then hugged him tightly, telling him that he deserved the scholarship. The two men remained entangled in the tight embrace for what seemed like ages, with Michael trying his very best to hold back his tears. Michael finally left John's home, but not before he vowed to do everything within his power to bring Charles and his mother to justice. As the well-connected and rich lawyer that he was, it didn't even take Michael more than 3 days to find a private investigator to handle the mission he had in mind. The private investigator's name was Tom, and he was the best in the business. Michael paid Tom handsomely and gave him all the information he got from John about Charles and Karen. Tom's job was simple. He was to track down Charles and Karen and alert Michael about their whereabouts. Tom immediately got to work. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and there was no positive feedback from Tom. Meanwhile, Michael placed John on a handsome monthly allowance and visited him almost every weekend. The blind old man was like Michael's second father. Then, about 4 months later, Michael was increasingly getting frustrated with Tom's slow progress and was thinking of reassigning the job to another private investigator when his phone rang one evening. It was Tom calling. The private investigator went straight to business and informed Michael that he had tracked Charles and Karen down to a lonely suburb of a backwater city in another state. Michael immediately sprang into action. He pulled some strings and contacted someone he knew in the city, who who then contacted the cops. 2 days after Tom's discovery, a police patrol car was speeding down to the house where Charles and Karen were hiding. Mother and son were arrested and repatriated to John's home state to face charges of fraud. Michael represented John during the court proceedings, where Charles and Karen finally confessed to stealing and eloping with John's $78 million after he went blind. They returned the $55 million they still had and were each sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for fraud. John tightly hugged Michael after the final ruling, crying into his ears, "You've paid my sacrifices back tenfold, my dear son." "Thank you, my beloved father," Michael replied with a smile. Michael couldn't believe that just one act of kindness had led him to his real benefactor. He was glad that he was able to get justice for a man who had improved the lives of many families by sponsoring the education of their children. Through him, many had dared to dream. It's a shame that such a kind man could have ended up living in pain and loneliness for the rest of his life if Michael hadn't come to the rescue. While Charles and his mother served their sentence, Michael took John on trips to beautiful places. Although the old man couldn't see any of them, he was simply glad to be traveling around with someone who truly loved and respected him. As Michael and John embarked on their trips, their bond deepened. Michael made it a mission to ensure John experienced a life filled with joy and companionship, making up for the years of loneliness and betrayal he had endured. Their first trip was to the Grand Canyon. Even though John couldn't see the majestic views, Michael described every detail to him, painting vivid pictures with his words. They stood at the edge of the canyon, the wind whipping around them, and Michael held John's hand firmly, describing the vastness of the landscape, the colors of the rocks, and the beauty of the sunset. "Can you feel it, John? The air is so fresh here, and the canyon stretches out as far as the eye can see." "It's breathtaking," Michael said. John smiled, his face turned towards the breeze. "I can imagine it, Michael. Thank you for bringing me here. It's more than I ever dreamed of." Their next adventure took them to the serene beaches of Hawaii. Michael booked a luxurious resort for their stay, ensuring every comfort for John. They spent their days walking along the beach, with Michael guiding John through the soft sand and warm waves. "This is paradise, John. The water is so clear, and the sand is like powder," Michael described. John dipped his toes in the water, feeling the gentle waves lap against his feet. "I may not see it, but I can feel the beauty all around." "Thank you, Michael." During their travels, Michael shared stories of his own journey, his struggles, and triumphs. John, in turn, opened up about his past, his career, and the heartache of losing his family to greed. Through their conversations, Michael learned invaluable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. "John, you've taught me so much about strength and grace. Your story is a testament to the power of the human spirit," Michael said one evening as they sat by a campfire in a secluded cabin in the mountains. "You've given me a second chance at life, Michael. I never thought I'd experience such joy and companionship again." "You've become the son I always wished for," John replied, his voice filled with emotion. Michael's determination to bring Charles and Karen to justice was unwavering. While they enjoyed their travels, he continued to gather evidence and build a strong case against them. The betrayal John had suffered needed to be addressed, and Michael was committed to ensuring they paid for their crimes. With the help of Tom, the private investigator, Michael compiled a comprehensive dossier on Charles and Karen's fraudulent activities. He interviewed former associates, tracked financial records, and uncovered a web of deceit that spanned years. "Tom, we need to make sure every detail is airtight. They can't get away with this," Michael insisted. "Don't worry, Michael. We've got them cornered. The evidence is overwhelming," Tom assured him. The day of the trial finally arrived. Michael, representing John, presented the case with a fervor that left no room for doubt. He detailed how Charles and Karen had manipulated and stolen from John, using his blindness as an opportunity to amass wealth at his expense. "These actions are not just criminal. They are a betrayal of the deepest kind. My client, John, trusted his family, only to be left destitute and abandoned. We seek justice for the years of suffering he endured," Michael declared in court. The jury was visibly moved by the evidence in Michael's passionate plea. Charles and Karen, unable to refute the mountain of proof against them, were found guilty and sentenced to prison. The verdict brought a sense of closure to John, who felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Justice has been served, John. They will pay for what they've done," Michael said, hugging John tightly after the ruling. "Thank you, Michael. You've given me back my dignity and my hope," John replied, tears of relief streaming down his face. With the legal battle behind them, Michael and John focused on building a new life together. Michael helped John settle into a beautiful home, ensuring he had all the support and care he needed. They continued their travels, exploring new places and creating cherished memories. One of their most memorable trips was to Europe, where they visited historic landmarks and immersed themselves in the rich cultures of France, Italy, and Greece. In Paris, they walked along the Seine River, with Michael describing the iconic Eiffel Tower and the bustling streets of the city. "Paris is a city of love, John. The lights, the architecture. It's like a dream," Michael said. "I can feel the romance in the air, Michael." "Thank you for making this dream come true," John replied, his heart full of gratitude. In Rome, they marveled at the ancient ruins of the Colosseum and the grandeur of the Vatican. Michael made sure John experienced the local cuisine, describing the flavors and aromas of authentic Italian dishes. "The pasta here is unlike anything I've ever tasted, John. The freshness of the ingredients is incredible," Michael said. "I may not see the sights, but I can taste and feel the essence of this beautiful country." "I'm so grateful to you, Michael," John responded. Their journey through Greece was equally enchanting, with visits to the Acropolis and the serene islands of Santorini and Mykonos. They spent their days exploring the history and beauty of the region, forging an unbreakable bond. "John, this world is filled with wonders, and I'm honored to share them with you," Michael said as they watched a stunning sunset over the Aegean Sea. "You've given me more than I ever hoped for, Michael. This life, these experiences, they are a gift beyond measure," John replied, his heart overflowing with gratitude. As the years passed, Michael and John continued to support each other, their friendship growing stronger with each passing day. Michael's success in his career reached new heights, and he used his influence to advocate for those in need, inspired by John's story. Michael established a foundation in John's name, dedicated to providing scholarships and support to underprivileged students. He wanted to ensure that John's legacy of kindness and generosity lived on, helping others achieve their dreams just as John had helped him. "John, this foundation is a testament to your spirit. Your generosity will continue to change lives for generations to come," Michael said during the foundation's inaugural ceremony. "I never imagined my life would have such an impact. Thank you, Michael, for honoring me in this way," John replied, deeply moved. The foundation's work brought joy and hope to countless families, and Michael's dedication to the cause was unwavering. He frequently visited schools, giving motivational speeches and sharing his journey, emphasizing the importance of kindness, resilience, and perseverance. "Each of you has the potential to achieve greatness. Believe in yourselves, work hard, and never forget the power of compassion. Together, we can create a brighter future," Michael encouraged the students. John often accompanied Michael on these visits, his presence a living testament to the transformative power of kindness. The students were inspired by their story, and many went on to achieve remarkable success, fueled by the belief that they too could overcome any obstacle. One day, many years later, Michael received a letter from a young student who had benefited from the Foundation's scholarship program. The letter spoke of the student's struggles, dreams, and gratitude for the support that had changed his life. "Dear Mr. Green, I wanted to thank you and the John Foundation for the incredible support you've given me. Your generosity has made it possible for me to pursue my education and dreams. I hope to one day give back to others, just as you have given to me. With deepest gratitude, Marcus Johnson." Michael read the letter aloud to John, tears of pride and joy welling up in their eyes. They had come full circle, witnessing the impact of their shared journey on the lives of others. "John, your legacy continues to inspire and uplift. Together, we've created something truly beautiful," Michael said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've made a difference, Michael, and that, my dear son, is the greatest achievement of all," John replied, his heart brimming with pride. Their bond, forged through kindness, resilience, and a shared commitment to helping others, remained unbreakable. Michael and John spent their remaining years together, cherishing each moment and continuing to spread love and hope wherever they went. In the end, Michael realized that true wealth was not measured by money or material possessions, but by the impact one has on the lives of others. Through his journey with John, he had discovered the true meaning of family, friendship, and the transformative power of kindness. And as they looked back on their incredible journey, Michael and John knew that they had found something far more precious than wealth. They had found a bond that transcended time and circumstance, a legacy of love that would endure forever.